Have you ever wondered why it hurts so much even when, on the surface, everything in your life looks fine? You've got a roof over your head, you work hard, you keep your responsibilities in order. Maybe you even have a family, friends, some money in the bank. And yet, at the end of the day, when the noise dies down, there's this weight in your chest you can't shake. You go to bed tired but not satisfied. You wake up heavy, not because you're weak, but because something inside you feels off, incomplete. You smile at people, you post pictures, you nod your head when someone asks how you're doing. And the truth is, you're not doing fine. Deep down, you feel like something is missing, and it gnaws at you in silence. Think about this: if life looks so normal, if you've done all the things you were supposed to do, then why do you still feel empty? Why does the sadness creep in when nobody's watching? Why do you need to distract yourself with Netflix, with scrolling, with food, with wine, with anything that numbs you for a moment? The uncomfortable truth is that most of your suffering doesn't come from the outside world. It's not really about your boss, or the economy, or even the people who hurt you in the past. Your deepest pain comes from within, from the part of yourself that you've ignored, denied, or abandoned. And here's the catch: you can keep running, but it will follow you everywhere. Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychologists who ever lived, said something that hits like a punch to the gut: what you do not bring to consciousness returns as fate. Let that sink in for a moment. What you refuse to see about yourself doesn't just disappear. It comes back to you in your choices, your relationships, your repeated mistakes. You think it's bad luck. You call it unfair. You blame life. But what's really happening is that your unconscious is running the show. Life is trying to show you something, and every time you turn your head away, the lesson comes back louder, harder, more painful. Maybe you've tried to fix this feeling already. You've meditated. You've read self-help books. You've taken advice from friends who told you to just stay positive. You've kept yourself busy, chasing achievements, buying stuff you thought would finally fill the void. And yet, here you are, still hurting, still restless, still feeling like no matter what you do, the shadow is right there behind you. That's because the pain doesn't want to be silenced. It doesn't want to be buried under distractions. Pain wants to be understood. It wants to be heard. Until you face it, it's going to keep knocking on your door. I know that's not the kind of message you usually hear. Most of the content out there is designed to comfort you with quick fixes, 5 easy steps to happiness, 10 hacks for a better morning routine. I'm not here to do that. I'm not here to pat you on the back and tell you everything's fine. I'm here to tell you the hard truth, the one you've probably felt in your gut but never dared to say out loud. You are suffering because you've lost connection with yourself. Not because life is cruel. Not because you're unlucky. But because somewhere along the way, you started living a life that isn't truly yours. Maybe right now you're at the bottom of the well, smiling on the outside while screaming on the inside. Maybe you've gotten so used to the pain that it feels normal, like a background noise you carry everywhere. Or maybe you've mastered the art of functioning, checking the boxes, doing what's expected, while inside you feel like a stranger in your own skin. Whatever the case, the fact that you're listening to this right now means one thing: part of you is tired of running. Part of you is ready to hear what the pain has been trying to tell you. Here's what I want you to consider. Suffering continues only because you haven't yet had the courage to look at its root. You treat the symptoms, you take pills for the anxiety, you force yourself to power through the exhaustion, you joke about your sleepless nights. But the root of the suffering? That's untouched. And Jung dedicated his life to mapping this dark terrain, the terrain of the human soul. He knew that only those who dive into their own darkness can ever find real light. That's why your suffering feels endless, because you're trying to heal a wound from the outside when its cause is deep within. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you sat in silence and asked yourself, what do I really feel? Not what should I feel or what do others expect me to feel? But honestly, what do you feel when all the masks are off? Most people never do this. They're too scared of what they'll find. So they keep themselves busy, distracted, productive. They keep smiling so nobody notices the storm inside. But that storm doesn't go away. It builds. And sooner or later, it spills out in broken relationships, and anger you can't explain, and an exhaustion that no amount of sleep can fix. And yet, here's the hope. This pain you carry is not a death sentence. It's a warning. It's your soul's alarm system going off, telling you something is wrong. Something is out of alignment. Pay attention. The problem isn't the pain itself. The problem is that you've been trying to ignore it, medicate it, silence it. What if instead of treating pain as the enemy, you treated it as the messenger? What if you believed that your suffering is not here to punish you, but to guide you back to yourself? I'll tell you this, once you're willing to stop running and start listening, everything changes. It doesn't mean the pain vanishes overnight. But it stops being this terrifying shadow chasing you. It becomes a teacher, showing you what you've denied for too long. And when you finally begin to face it, when you begin to peel back the layers and reconnect with who you really are, you discover something incredible. The suffering that once felt unbearable becomes the doorway to freedom. So yes, it hurts. Yes, it feels unfair. But your pain is not meaningless. It's not random. It's the most personal wake-up call you will ever get. The only question is, will you keep numbing it, or will you finally listen? Let's get real for a moment. You probably believe that your suffering comes from your circumstances, from a boss who doesn't appreciate you, from bills that pile up, from the pressure of trying to be a good parent, a good partner, a good provider. And yes, those things weigh heavy on you. But here's the hard truth, the kind of pain that eats away at you, the kind that keeps you awake at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling, doesn't come from the outside world. It comes from living disconnected from who you really are. That's why, even when life looks fine on the outside, you feel restless on the inside. From the very beginning, most of us were trained to disconnect. Think back to your childhood. Remember how often you were told, don't cry, be strong, or stop being so dramatic. You learned early on that certain emotions weren't acceptable. Maybe you were praised when you followed the rules and scolded when you didn't. Maybe you were told that success meant fitting in, doing things the way everyone else does, keeping your head down. And slowly, without even noticing, you built a mask. You became who you thought you had to be in order to be loved, respected, accepted. But in the process, you drifted further and further away from yourself. This is the tragedy Carl Jung warned about when he said, the greatest tragedy of the soul is to live a life that is not yours. And if you're honest, you might see this as exactly what you've been doing. You've become so used to playing a role that you no longer know what's real and what's performance. You smile when you don't feel like it. You say yes when every fiber in you wants to scream no. You go along to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to make sure everyone else is comfortable. And in the meantime, you abandon yourself. The soul notices. It always does. It knows when you're faking it. It knows when you're pushing down your anger, when you're swallowing your sadness, when you're pretending you don't care even though you're breaking inside. And the soul screams in the only way it can, through symptoms. Anxiety that feels like your chest is being crushed. Insomnia that keeps you wired when all you want is rest. Fatigue that no amount of coffee can fix. A constant low-grade sadness that you can't explain. These are not random. These are not defects. These are alarms. Your soul's way of saying, stop betraying me. Come back. But instead of listening, you do what you've always done. You double down on the role. You push harder. You tell yourself you should be grateful because others have it worse. You try to silence the alarms by working more, eating more, buying more, doing more. You get used to the disconnect like people get used to living next to a noisy highway. After a while you don't notice it, but it's damaging you all the same. And eventually, you wake up one day and realize you don't even recognize the person in the mirror. You see your face, but not your soul. You're there, but you're not alive. That's the suffering of disconnection. Not the pain of failure, not the pain of rejection, but the pain of living a lie. The pain of knowing, deep down, that you've abandoned who you are just to fit in, just to be safe, just to avoid rocking the boat. That's why so many people today feel a constant emptiness. It's not because they don't have enough success, or money, or likes on social media. It's because they've traded authenticity for approval, and the soul cannot survive on approval alone. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you asked yourself, what do I really want? Not what your parents expected, not what society praised, not what your friends are doing, but you, at the core of your being. When was the last time you gave yourself permission to admit what you truly feel, what you truly desire, what you truly dream of? For most people, the answer is never. And that's why they walk through life feeling like ghosts of themselves, going through the motions, stuck on autopilot, disconnected from the very thing that makes them alive. But here's the hope. This disconnect is not permanent. It can be healed. And the healing starts the moment you stop running from yourself and start listening. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't need a 5-year plan or a spiritual guru. What you need is honesty, the willingness to stop pretending that you're fine when you're not. The courage to admit, even if only to yourself, that you are lost, that you've been living someone else's story, and that you want to come home to your own. Coming back to yourself doesn't happen overnight. It happens in small but radical acts. It happens when you finally allow yourself to cry instead of swallowing the tears. When you admit that you're angry instead of pasting on a smile. When you stop saying yes to things that drain you and start daring to say no. It happens every time you choose truth over performance, authenticity over approval. And each time you do, the disconnect lessens, the fog lifts, and you start to feel alive again. Because make no mistake, disconnection is not just uncomfortable, it's deadly to the soul. And reconnection, though terrifying at first, is the only path to real peace. You can't outrun the emptiness. You can't numb it forever. At some point, you have to decide whether you're willing to keep living a role or whether you're ready to finally live as yourself. That's the choice. And deep down, you already know which one will save you. So if you feel that emptiness, if you feel like a stranger in your own life, don't ignore it. Don't brush it off as stress or bad luck. Recognize it for what it is, the soul's cry for reconnection. It's not here to break you. It's here to wake you up. And the question now is, are you willing to listen? Let's talk about the part of you that you've worked so hard to hide. The side you don't post about, the side you don't admit even to your closest friends, the side you may not even want to admit to yourself. Carl Jung called this the shadow. And whether you realize it or not, you carry one. Everyone does. And until you understand it, it will keep shaping your life from the dark. So what is the shadow? It's everything you've pushed down, everything you've decided is unacceptable. It's the anger you weren't allowed to express, the fears you pretended didn't exist, the desires you were told were shameful, the ambition you disguised as humility, the sadness you swallowed because you didn't want to be too much. The shadow is built out of all the pieces of yourself that you rejected because the world told you they weren't good enough. And yet, they didn't disappear. They didn't die. They're still inside you, living in the dark, waiting for the day you'll finally face them. And here's where it gets tricky. The shadow doesn't sit quietly. It doesn't patiently wait. It leaks out. Think about the times you've exploded at someone you love over something small. Think about the opportunities you've sabotaged even when you wanted them badly. Think about the relationships you've destroyed because of an impulse you couldn't explain. That wasn't random. That was your shadow at work. It doesn't knock politely on the door. It hijacks your behavior when you least expect it, because it wants your attention. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That's exactly what's happening when you feel like life is just repeating the same painful story. You tell yourself, I always attract the wrong partners. Or, I never get ahead at work. Or, I don't know why I keep messing up my own happiness. You think it's bad luck. You think it's the universe working against you, but it's not. It's your shadow, pulling the strings behind the curtain. And it will keep doing that until you bring it into the light. But here's the problem. Facing the shadow is terrifying. Because it means admitting things you don't want to admit. It means acknowledging that you're not just a polite, responsible, smiling version of yourself you show the world. It means accepting that there's anger in you, selfishness in you, jealousy in you, greed in you, fear in you. It means seeing that monster inside and realizing it's not just a monster, it's also human, and it's also you. And that's uncomfortable. Nobody wants to believe they carry darkness. But pretending you don't is the fastest way to let that darkness control you. Think of it like this. Imagine you're in a house, and there's a basement you've never gone into. You've locked the door, told yourself it's fine, nothing down there matters. But the truth is, the basement is filling up with things you don't want to deal with, rotting garbage, old wounds, mold spreading in the dark. And the longer you ignore it, the worse it gets. Eventually, it starts leaking into the rooms you actually live in. That's your shadow. You can lock the door, but sooner or later, it seeps into your daily life. The only way to stop it from running the house is to finally go downstairs with a light and face what's there. And here's the surprising part. The shadow isn't just darkness. It also contains your power. That anger you've buried? It can become energy for courage. That ambition you've disguised? It can become drive for growth. That fear you've tried to hide? It can become wisdom when you finally understand it. The shadow is not your enemy. It's the exiled part of your soul that wants to come home. It doesn't need to be killed. It needs to be integrated. But integration doesn't happen by wishing it away. It happens by courage. Courage to look in the mirror without filters. Courage to write down your ugliest thoughts and admit them to yourself. Courage to say, yes, I have envy, I have rage, I have selfishness, and that doesn't make me evil. It makes me human. The danger isn't that you have a shadow. The danger is pretending you don't. Because when you pretend, the shadow controls you from the back seat. When you admit it, when you own it, you finally put yourself in the driver's seat. Let me ask you this. What part of yourself are you most afraid for others to see? Is it the part that gets jealous when a friend succeeds? Is it the part that wants more than you've been told you deserve? Is it the part that gets furious when someone disrespects you? That's your shadow knocking. And as long as you deny it, you'll keep calling it bad luck. You'll keep saying, I don't know why this always happens to me. But the moment you face it, you begin to take your power back. And don't misunderstand me. Facing your shadow doesn't mean acting out your worst impulses. It doesn't mean giving your anger free rein or using your fear as an excuse. It means recognizing that these parts exist, that they are messages, that they have something to teach you. It means learning how to channel them instead of being controlled by them. Because what you reject weakens you, and what you integrate sets you free. So the question is not whether you have a shadow, you do. The question is whether you're willing to face it. Because until you do, it will keep running the show. But once you shine light on it, once you embrace it as part of your humanity, it transforms. And what once felt like a monster in the dark becomes an ally, a source of strength, a guide to wholeness. Your shadow isn't here to destroy you. It's here to complete you. The only thing standing between you and freedom is the courage to look where you've been afraid to look. So, will you keep pretending? Or will you dare to step into the dark and finally meet yourself? Up until now, you've started to recognize that the pain you feel is not random, that the emptiness isn't just bad luck, and that the shadow inside you is real. But here comes the hardest step, the one most people never take. It's not enough to understand your suffering. It's not enough to have read the words of Jung or heard these truths. The real transformation begins only when you look your own darkness in the eye and stop running from it. That's the hardest step because it demands brutal honesty. And honesty, especially with yourself, is not easy. Think about how much energy you've spent pretending. Pretending you're fine. Pretending you're happy. Pretending you're over things that still eat at you late at night. Pretending you're stronger than you feel. That act has cost you more than you realize. It has drained your spirit. Facing your darkness means tearing down that act. It means standing in front of the mirror and finally saying, this is who I really am. This is what I really feel. This is what I've been hiding. It feels terrifying, because for the first time you stop playing the victim of circumstances and admit that you are also part of your own suffering. And here's the paradox. That admission, as painful as it is the doorway to freedom. Because until you admit it, you're powerless. As long as you keep blaming life, other people, or even bad luck, you stay stuck. But the moment you admit, I've been lying to myself, I've been ignoring my body, my emotions, my truth, something shifts. Suddenly you're no longer in the passenger seat. You may not be driving full speed yet, but you've taken back the wheel. So what does it look like in practice to face the unconscious? It looks like listening to what your body has been screaming when your mind insists on ignoring it. That stomach pain that shows up every time you sit across from the wrong person. That tightness in your chest when you agree to another demand that diminishes you. That exhaustion that drops on you the moment you force a fake smile. None of that is random. Those are signals. The unconscious doesn't send you emails. It sends you sensations, symptoms, patterns. Your job is to finally stop dismissing them as coincidence and start decoding them as messages. One of the most powerful ways to begin is through writing. I'm not talking about pretty journaling with quotes and bullet points. I mean raw, uncensored writing. Sit down every day and confess to the page what you're most afraid to admit. Write down the things you would never say out loud. Write what you're ashamed of, what you're jealous of, what you secretly want but feel you don't deserve. Because when those words escape the prison of silence, they lose their power to control you. When you see them on paper, you realize they are not demons, they are parts of you asking to be acknowledged. Another way is through what I call the therapeutic mirror. Whether with a psychologist, a coach, or someone qualified to hold up that mirror, you need a space where you can say things without filters and get feedback that helps you understand your own patterns. Jung said the unconscious is not a garbage dump, but a living intelligence. It's not out to destroy you. It's trying to wake you up. But you can't wake up if you keep hiding under the blanket of excuses. Now let me be real with you. This process is not glamorous. It doesn't feel like a spa day. It feels more like walking straight into a storm. Jung called it crossing through your own internal hell with your eyes wide open. And that's exactly what it is. Facing your darkness is not about feeling good, it's about getting real. It's about choosing truth over comfort. It's about finally saying, I'd rather be broken open by honesty than slowly suffocate under the weight of lies. And courage, real courage, is not the absence of fear. It's moving even while fear is screaming at you. Don't wait to feel ready, because you never will. The shadow will never politely step aside and say, okay, now's the time. You have to walk into the unknown shaking, doubting, trembling, and still keep going. That's what separates the few who transform from the many who stay stuck in cycles of suffering. You may be wondering, why would I want to face the darkness if it's so painful? Because the truth is, the pain you're carrying now is already excruciating. Pretending isn't saving you. Avoidance isn't protecting you. Running away hasn't worked. All it has done is keep the suffering alive. Facing your darkness doesn't add to your pain, it transforms it. It turns the chaos into clarity. It turns the symptoms into a language you can finally understand. And yes, it requires humility. It requires dropping the ego that wants to always appear strong and admitting, I don't have it all figured out. I'm not fine. I need to face what's inside. That moment of humility is the beginning of true strength. Because strength isn't about how much you can carry while pretending it doesn't hurt. Strength is about dropping the act and daring to deal with what's real. So let me ask you this. What would happen if, just for one day, you stopped running? What if you stopped distracting yourself, stopped numbing, stopped putting on the mask, and instead sat down in silence and asked, what is really going on inside me? What if you actually listened? I know it's terrifying. I know it feels like opening a door to a room you've avoided for years. But what if, behind that door, is not destruction but liberation? What if the very thing you've been running from is the thing that will finally set you free? This is the hardest step, yes. But it's also the most important. Because until you face your own darkness, you will never know your true light. And the question you must answer now is simple. Are you willing to stop pretending, stop running, and finally walk into the storm of yourself? If you are, then what waits on the other side is not more suffering, it's the beginning of real healing. Most people spend their lives doing everything they can to avoid pain. We medicate it, we drown it in distractions, we bury it under food, alcohol, endless scrolling, shallow relationships, and quick pleasures. We treat pain as the villain, as something to get rid of as fast as possible. But here's a truth most people never want to hear: as long as you keep trying to escape pain, it will keep chasing you. Why? Because pain is not here to be eliminated. It's here to be understood. Pain is not your enemy, it's your compass. Think back to the hardest changes in your life. How many of them happened because you were comfortable? None. Change doesn't start in comfort. It begins in chaos. It begins when something breaks, when the job falls apart, when the relationship collapses, when the emptiness becomes unbearable. That's when you were forced to look deeper. That's when your soul said, "This can't go on." Jung saw suffering not as a mistake, but as a signal, a call to transformation. Pain is the language your soul uses when it wants you to stop betraying yourself. Let me give you an example. Imagine someone who spends their entire life saying yes to everyone else. They're always available, always helpful, always smiling. On the surface, they look like the perfect friend, the perfect employee, the perfect partner. But inside, they're exhausted. They feel drained, anxious, resentful. They can't sleep. Their body breaks down with chronic fatigue. They go to doctors, they take medication, they try vitamins, but nothing works. Why? Because the problem isn't physical, it's existential. Their soul is screaming, "Stop abandoning yourself. Stop living for everyone else while you disappear." That pain is not random. It's a compass pointing them back to their own boundaries, their own truth. Or think of someone who keeps repeating the same toxic pattern in relationships. They always end up with partners who are emotionally unavailable, who make them feel small, who leave them broken. After the third, the fifth, the seventh time, they say, "Why does this always happen to me? I must just have bad luck." No, it's not luck. It's pain showing them a wound that hasn't healed, probably from childhood, maybe from abandonment or rejection that was never addressed. And until they face it, the pain keeps repeating the same lesson over and over again. The suffering is not punishment. It's a mirror. This is why Jung said, suffering has to be experienced fully before it can be overcome. That doesn't mean wallowing in misery. It means you can't avoid it, you can't skip over it, you can't numb it away. You have to walk through it. You have to listen to it. Because when you start to treat pain as symbolic language instead of a curse, everything changes. Suddenly, every breakdown carries a message. Every panic attack is a letter from your unconscious. Every heartbreak is a signal that something in you is crying for attention. So what if, instead of asking, "How do I get rid of this pain?" you started asking, "What is this pain trying to teach me?" That's a radical shift. Because then you stop being a victim of suffering and start becoming a student of it. You begin to see that the very thing you feared, the very thing you tried to escape, might be the doorway to your greatest growth. I know this is hard to hear. We've been trained to see pain as failure, as weakness, as punishment. But what if pain is actually guidance? What if the thing that hurts is pointing you directly toward the part of yourself that needs healing? Think about it. A broken bone hurts not because your body hates you, but because it needs attention so it can heal. Emotional pain works the same way. It doesn't show up to ruin your life. It shows up to save it. Of course, this requires courage, because it means you have to stop numbing and start listening. You have to sit with the discomfort instead of running from it. That's where growth happens, in the silence, in the raw honesty, in the moment when you finally stop distracting yourself and ask, what is this pain showing me about my life, about myself, about what I need to change? And here's the paradox. The more you resist pain, the bigger it grows. But the moment you face it, the moment you lean into it with presence, it starts to transform. It stops being a monster in the shadows and becomes a guide with a message. You realize that the anxiety was trying to protect you from betraying yourself. That the sadness was asking you to grieve what you've lost. That the anger was begging you to set boundaries. Pain becomes a compass pointing to the truth. Let me ask you directly. What is the pain in your life right now? Is it the crushing pressure at work that leaves you drained? Is it the loneliness in your marriage that no one else sees? Is it the exhaustion of always being there for everyone else while nobody is there for you? Whatever it is, I promise you, it's not meaningless. It's not punishment. It's a message. And if you have the courage to listen, it can change everything. Here's the responsibility part. Once you see pain this way, you can't go back to ignorance. You can't keep blaming bad luck or unfairness. Because now you know that ignoring pain is ignoring yourself. Running away from pain is abandoning yourself. And that's the deepest betrayal of all. But when you choose to listen, when you choose to see pain as guidance, you stop being a victim of it. You start becoming the author of your healing. And that's the invitation right now. Stop asking how to eliminate pain. Start asking what it's pointing you toward. Stop running from it and start walking with it. Pain is not here to break you. It's here to wake you up. And the moment you accept that, the moment you embrace the discomfort instead of resisting it, you begin to discover something incredible. Pain, when listened to, doesn't just guide you out of suffering. It leads you to yourself. And that's the only place real freedom begins. There comes a moment, after all the running, the breakdowns, the late nights staring at the ceiling, when something shifts. It doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't feel like a movie scene with triumphant music playing in the background. It comes quietly, almost like a whisper you barely notice. But that whisper changes everything. It's the moment when you stop resisting. It's the moment when you finally accept that your pain, your shadow, your struggles, they're not here to ruin you. They're here to guide you. And in that moment, you begin to feel whole for the first time in your life. So what does it mean to be whole? It doesn't mean you're perfect. It doesn't mean you never feel fear or anger or sadness again. Wholeness means you stop fighting against yourself. It means you stop trying to cut off the parts of you that make you uncomfortable. It means you embrace your shadow instead of pretending it doesn't exist. It means you realize that your anger, your shame, your jealousy, your grief, these aren't defects. They are legitimate parts of your humanity. And when you integrate them, instead of rejecting them, you finally stop betraying yourself. That's when the suffering begins to dissolve. Carl Jung called this process individuation. Not becoming special or different, but becoming fully yourself. Authentic. Real. Without distortions. Without the masks you've worn for decades. And here's the truth, you don't need to find yourself, because you were never lost. You just need to stop abandoning yourself. Integration isn't about inventing a new you. It's about remembering who you've always been underneath the roles, the lies, the expectations. When you reach this point, you see that every crisis, every heartbreak, every night you thought would break you, it all had a purpose. It stripped away the lies. It forced you to abandon illusions. It burned off the masks so you could finally stand in the truth of who you are. And the truth isn't always comfortable. It doesn't mean you'll never be vulnerable again. But it means you no longer live in hiding. You no longer live on autopilot. You no longer say yes when you mean no, or pretend you're fine when you're breaking inside. And when that shift happens, your life changes in ways you couldn't have imagined. Suddenly you notice the people who uplift you and the people who drain you. You stop tolerating the things you once accepted just to avoid conflict. You stop apologizing for existing. You begin to say no without guilt and yes to yourself without shame. This is what power feels like, not control over others, but alignment with yourself. And alignment is the only true freedom there is. But here's the warning. This is where many people stop. They feel the relief of no longer drowning in pain, they feel the freedom of saying yes to themselves, and they think the journey is done. They think, I've healed. I'm good now. But Jung was clear, healing is not complete until it turns into contribution. Once you've walked through your own darkness, once you've tasted the light of wholeness, the question becomes, what will you do with it? How will you live now that you're awake? Because awareness comes with responsibility. Once you see, you can't unsee. Once you know, you can't unknow. Ignorance is no longer an option. You've been called to live differently. To live with purpose, with awareness, with truth. The real question now is, will you take what you've discovered and actually build your life around it, or will you drift back into old patterns because they're easier? And this is where choice becomes everything. You don't need to be 100% ready, no one ever is. You don't need to have all the answers. What you need is the decision, the daily commitment to stop betraying yourself. To live consciously. To look at yourself with both firmness and compassion. To say, I may not be perfect, but I will no longer abandon who I really am. That's integration. That's power. That's freedom. Think about what this means for you personally. Maybe it means finally leaving the job that's been crushing your soul. Maybe it means setting boundaries in a relationship where you've been silenced for too long. Maybe it means daring to pursue the dream you've kept locked away because it felt selfish or impossible. Or maybe it means something simpler but no less radical, speaking honestly about how you feel, allowing yourself to rest when you're tired, giving yourself permission to be human without guilt. These are not small things. These are revolutionary acts of self-respect. And here's the beauty. When you begin to live this way, your life becomes a message without you even trying. People around you notice. They see someone who isn't pretending, who isn't running, who isn't consumed by bitterness or fear. They see someone real. And your courage gives them courage. Your integration lights a path for others who are still hiding in their shadows. That's how healing multiplies. It doesn't stop with you. It ripples outward. So yes, this is the final step, but it's also the beginning of a new way of living. You've walked through the darkness. You've faced the shadow. You've listened to pain and allowed it to guide you home. Now you stand at a crossroads. You can keep repeating the old story, or you can choose to live awake, to live in alignment, to live with purpose. The choice is yours, and it's a choice you'll make every single day. Pain was never here to break you. It was here to bring you home. And now that you are home, now that you are whole, the question is simple. What will you do with this freedom? Will you waste it by drifting back into sleep, or will you use it to build the life you were always meant to live? That's your decision. And the world is waiting for your answer. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this journey. I know your time is valuable. If this message spoke to you, if it gave you even one moment of clarity or peace, I'd be grateful if you'd let me know. A simple like, a comment with your thoughts, or subscribing to the channel helps this community grow, and it helps more people who might need these words to find them. Share your reflections below, I do read them. I'll see you in the next chapter. Until then, take care of your peace.